And we're live.
Hello. La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Thursday night generational change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. I'm having some hair trouble. How's my hair?
Wrong.
Wrong. Flip it.
It's just, I don't know that I can
Flip
because
it.
I don't know, man. It's
Yeah.
there it is.
Yeah. You know, us guys have to look pretty too. Oh, absolutely. You see, us guys, it's a lot easier. So it is Thursday night. Some not so good news, of course. Steve Grumbine, unfortunately, is really under the weather. And he kind of brought it on himself because he told me he wasn't feeling well earlier today. And then he decided to have Chick-fil-A for dinner. So the gods are punishing him as a result of that, you know. But we're always, I'm always fascinated by, you know, when we talk about, you know, we do, and Teresa, you're absolutely right. We do need post office banking.
For sure.
Because one of the things that's crazy about what's going on right now with Amazon is basically trying to circumvent the entire postal system. And when that happens, again, it's the seeping in of the entire oligarchic infrastructure that completely consumes our lives. And I'm reading the book right now by Carol Roth, who is a friend of the show. She's dead set against MMT. Yet at the same time, she identifies almost the exact same problems that MMTers are identifying.
I do not understand how you can be against something that just is.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. That's like, it's like, I understand being against certain policies. I understand but to say you're against something that just is very strange to me.
Yeah, you know, right now when we're trying to figure out exactly how the money supply has become so out of sight, out of mind, much like has been the experiences everyone likes to talk about during the pandemic, it's because when the money's printed, it's only going in certain places. It's not being spread around into the economy the way that it's supposed to in a functioning, you know, democracy. We do not have that. We have an oligarchy. And what happens in an oligarchy? Who gets the money?
The plutocrats.
Yeah, but, you know, they can't catch a break. You know, the plutocrats are the ones that are, you know, being hunted, and they have to pay taxes, you know, those pesky little things, because,
not
you know,
enough.
who the hell wants roads and shit, you know, all the things that actually matter. And right now it's, you know, you're looking at the economy, you're looking at all these things that are going on, and it's fair enough to say, and I think that this is the right place to start. You know, you take somebody like Elon Musk, who clearly doesn't have to worry about anything regarding economics. He does what he wants to do. He decided he wanted to plant the flag when it came to whatever his motivation was. He decided he wanted to spend, you know, a fourth of his wealth on owning a major social media company. He didn't create it. Mark Zuckerberg, stole his idea, but he was on the ground floor.
From the Winklevi.
The Winklevoss boys.
I say the Winklevi.
The Winklevi because there's two.
Yeah.
And then you have Jack Dorsey, who decided that he didn't want to be part of the ruckus anymore. Ultimately, the guys, let me tell you, if you guys haven't seen, there's a great video on YouTube regarding the creation of Instagram. Instagram, to me, has always been the best social media channel until Zuckerberg got his hands on it. And then that's when everything changed, when Meta took it over. And the same with TikTok, the same with any of these. Look at what we're dealing with here on YouTube. We're a heavily suppressed channel.
Yeah, we need to start considering. So I was on We Are Change podcast.
Got 3 good clips coming from that podcast.
Good with Luke Rakowski. And, one of the things that he had suggested, and I know that they do there, is they do a 2-hour live. The first hour is on YouTube. I don't know if they're also on Rumble at that time too, but then the second hour is exclusively Rumble. And so they don't censor themselves. So they're really conscious the first hour. Well, I mean, we're just not careful, and that's the truth. And we're just not careful. It's a combination.
There's like a time period in which you are allowed to have certain content.
But there's certain words you're not allowed to say. Now, a lot of this
words
stuff
you can't say on TV.
No. No, seriously, there are certain ones. Now, some of it is stuff that we just generally don't talk about here, having to do with a certain illness that took hold of the country in 2020. You're not allowed to mention that. You're not allowed to mention having to do with what they wanted to do to sort of fix that problem.
Right.
So, and those are things we don't talk about it anyway, but there are other things that we do that get us, and I don't know what they all are. And people like Luke know this, and we need to know this. We need to know the George Carlin's words that we can't say.
Yes. You can debate whether Musk implodes in the truest sense, but the way he conducted himself on that stage was a borderline implosion.
By the way, I didn't see it. I don't care. So don't call me a joke. I think Elon Musk is ridiculous personally, and I never want to give any attention to any of those children.
But I would agree with you that what Musk actually did is the right thing. You do not and should never have to answer to anybody when it comes to what is in the best interests of the people that are using your technology. Or that could be crossed into any political arena or any economic arena. Are you answering to the will of the people? Are you answering to the will of the corporate oligarchs? Because that's what we're dealing with right now.
But he is a corporate oligarch.
He is. But he definitely walks to the beat of his own drum.
He does, and yet he'll censor what he wants to censor. He didn't spend a quarter of his fortune doing something that would really make a difference in independent media in the world, and to really take a stand and really do anything when you have that kind of fuck you money. He didn't do that. No, he got a social media platform so that he could play dick wars with other oligarchs and stupid crap. He has the kind of money, you're talking like Rupert Murdoch money. You're talking money like you could have an entire real free speech situation going.
Yeah. And
instead he buys Twitter. So so the whole concept of him being some sort of real, pioneer for free speech on social media, I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, and the other problem you have with Musk, which has always been my biggest issue with him, is that he treats workers like shit. And that's the big thing. He's anti-labor. He doesn't pay a living.
That's a big problem too.
If you look at what happened with Sean Fain, the UAW, and what the compensation package is for the auto workers at GM, at Chrysler, and what's the third one that I'm forgetting?
Stellaris.
They are absolutely now, as a result of the strike, going to be fairly compensated. Prior to the strike,
I love you, Sean Fain.
They were making twice as much as Tesla employees were making. Now you add in how much more they're going to make in terms of benefits. I mean, that should be the glaring, you want to shine a light under Musk's ass. That's the thing that matters. Right. It's like the entire Trump presidency, the corporate oligarchy in the neoliberal establishment was so focused on saying that Trump was a Russian asset. We all know that that's bullshit, and that everybody was essentially focusing on that as a means of trying to get him. But in reality, no one was talking about the fact that the biggest crime, if you will, that Trump committed as president was violating the Emoluments Clause. He was using the presidency to enrich himself, like pretty much everybody in Congress does as well, enriching themselves while they're there in elected office, like our congresswoman. They're never going to address that issue because that's the issue that everyone is violating. So you have to create shit. And the same is true with Elon Musk. If you're going to go after Musk, why are you going after him? Because he doesn't want to break bread with certain advertisers. We're going to play a clip. You're going to see exactly what we mean.
I disagree with the idea of unions, but perhaps for a reason that is different than people may expect, which is I just don't like anything which creates kind of a lords and peasants sort of thing. And I think the unions naturally try to create negativity in a company and create a kind of sort of lords and peasants situation.
And you're clarifying this now, but there's a public perception that was part of a apology tour, if you will. That this had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself.
But
go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
Well, let me ask you then.
That's how I feel. Don't advertise.
How do you think then about the economics of X? If part of the underlying model, at least today, and maybe it needs to shift, maybe the answer is it needs to shift away from advertising. If you believe that this is the one part of your business where you will be beholden to those who have this view, what do you do?
F-Y.
I understand that, but there's a reality too, right?
Yes. No.
I mean, Linda Yaccarino's right here, and she's got to sell advertising.
Absolutely. So, totally. No. Actually, what this advertising boycott is going to do, it's going to kill the company.
And do you think that
and the whole world will know that those advertisers killed the company, and we will document it in great detail.
But those advertisers, I imagine, are going to say, we didn't kill the company.
Oh, yeah?
They're going to say...
Tell it to Earth.
That's good. That last headline was perfect.
Yeah, well, I liked how he started it, and I do agree. And if there is nothing to be said about having that kind of money, but the ability to tell people to go fuck themselves, I don't know what the point of it is.
Jen!
And no, seriously, like that actually had made sense. But then when he was like not caring about the company imploding, and then he sounded like a petulant child.
But then, of course,
sounded stupid.
But again, the big problem here is not that Elon used crass language. Who gives a damn? I actually agree with what he said. And if you don't agree, hey, that's on you. But to me, I like the idea of basically saying your corporate overlords are not going to have me answer to them. And that is the way that it should be. Now, you don't have to like Elon Musk, and there's a lot not to like.
I'm not a fan.
But the most important part of that clip, which is not even being talked about, is the fact that at the very beginning, he specifically says, I don't like unions.
Well, and right now, and the way that he said it creates, what did he say, like a serfdom, as if he is not Lord Farquaad. That's, for anybody who knows Shrek, I'm telling you, he is Lord Farquaad. This man has such a major insecurity situation going on with himself. I don't know what he is compensating for.
Well, he doesn't really have his hair is.
It's a lot of things.
It's all fluff.
It's a lot of things. Okay, there's something off there. There's just something off there. And
I think it's your groove. I think you may have made that comment. Okay, fine. You know what? Not all unions are created equal. We agree, which is why you look at, we always say the best example is look at United Auto Workers with Shawn Fain and the teachers union with Randy Weingarten. There is the distinction. You have a union that literally answers to the rank and file versus a union where Miss whatever Weingarten is judge, jury, and executioner of that union. And overwhelmingly, they disagree with what she does. The fact that she literally is locked arms with the Democratic Party establishment. I spoke to Randy Weingarten one time back in 2020, asking not for an endorsement, but for an interview with the teachers union when Jen was running against Wasserman Schultz for Congress. Her response was one sentence, and that was the end of it. I support Wasserman Schultz, and that's it.
Okay, and I think that the more important issue, other than the down the rabbit hole with the teachers union, is that regarding unions, is that we acknowledge that there are a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
In labor unions, and that, you know, all organizations sort of like become like too big for themselves, and that is a problem. However, statistically speaking, and when we look at other countries and throughout history, we have a better economic situation when our unions are strong. Mm-hmm. We have a better economy when we've got workers that have disposable income. And that is something that, even though I don't agree with all different unions, statistically speaking, unions are better for having workers have better conditions. It's just the way it is.
Definitely agree. And I like this idea, Ron. Well, I'm for Elon to sell Twitter, but not to the oligarchs. Hey, listen, the best situation would be like the Green Bay Packers. Let people buy shares in the company.
Totally.
That's the way that then you could really have the people have a say.
That's a legacy. And if he really, honestly, that's the kind of thing that you do when you want to not be just all about yourself.
That's true. And I think that at times Musk is he's a very
worker co-op.
Musk is definitely, let's put it this way, of all the billionaire oligarchs minus Mark Cuban, Elon Musk definitely has the most unique personality out of anybody.
That's not a
it's not really saying it's well. Listen, I don't think the one thing I'll say about Musk is I don't think he's a full-blown sociopath the way that Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos are. But that doesn't. Bill Gates is the king of the mountain. He's on that. He's on the Mount Rushmore of the biggest psychopathic oligarchs. But ultimately, he's still an oligarch, and he's still answering to his ego and what he wants. Now, the fact that he's not giving in to that particular side of corporate oligarchy, where you have these advertisers who, don't want people talking about what's going on in Israel Palestine. Musk is like, hey, listen, they're going to fucking talk about it. And that's the end of the discussion.
And by the way, I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know that because I didn't know what it was referencing in terms of what advertisers he's talking about. So he is specifically regarding advertisers that are referencing him as anti-Semitic for whatever it was that he said or did or posted.
Which again is all BS.
Well, and I don't know whether he's anti-Semitic or not. It's actually irrelevant to me. So that's what the advertisers have their panties in a bunch about, is something that was anti-Semitic. And so he gave them the FU. See, I got to respect that. I got to give props when props are due, good for him. And come on. If I had that kind of money, the inordinate amount of FUs that I would be putting out there to the universe.
Yes, but you would also
larger than life.
Yeah, so but you would also be giving back to the people in a way that most would not.
Well, yeah. But the point is that when you have that kind of money, if nothing else, you should be using it for FUs.
Speaking of anti-Semitism and Israel Palestine, the biggest Zionist mass murderer of them all, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Very helpful.
For those of you who have been paying attention, because let's face it, you'd have to be living under a rock. Henry Kissinger made it to 100 years old before he kicked the bucket. Now, here's a man who is a legitimate mass murderer. And he isn't just any mass murderer. This is a guy who is as directly responsible for the complete and utter decimation of Southeast Asia.
We're talking 3 to 4 million people.
And that's not even counting the people who suffered mightily from Agent Orange for many years after the fact, may not have died in the bombings.
3 to 4 million people.
But between Northern Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, especially Cambodia,
oh my God,
this man has literally destroyed not just millions of lives, but economies. Like, he is again, if there's a ninth circle of hell, he's floating there. But here's the thing. That man was given the Nobel Peace Prize 50 years ago. That award became irrelevant.
But it never
was in any way.
That was the first sign that I think that started losing its meaning. You know, I mean, it was sort of, Obama was the final nail in the coffin, I think, but it had already sort of lost its meaning when you give it to someone like Henry Kissinger.
And that's not the end of it. We're going to play a clip now basically highlighting all the things that people had to say about this man kicking the bucket. And we'll further comment because there's a couple of other layers to the story that, as should one be expecting, has not been covered in the media. What a surprise.
In 1973, the largest transfer. The largest transfer. The largest transfer. The largest transfer. Of weapons sent. Of weapons sent. From the United States to Israel. From the United States to Israel. Happened under the watch. Happened under the watch. Of Henry Kissinger. Of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger is one of the most ardent Zionists. Is one of the most ardent Zionists in U.S. history. In U.S. history. And he just died. And he just died.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died. That's according to his consulting firm, Kissinger Associates. He was 100 years old. A statement says that he passed away at his home today in Connecticut. Kissinger, of course, was Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford, the only person to ever serve as the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State at the same time. More now on his legacy.
I know all of you will want to hear from the new Secretary of State.
Henry Kissinger never really needed an introduction on the world stage again. Kissinger, the most famous statesman of the last half of the 20th century. Celebrated and controversial.
I'm not going to make it.
Nixon and an undiplomatic Kissinger thought more bombing of the North would help.
I would then recommend that you start bombing the retreaters out of them within 48 hours.
Kissinger approved secret bombings of North Vietnamese units in Cambodia without congressional approval. He would say sometimes statesmen have to choose among evils.
Under Nixon, Kissinger oversaw the massacre of millions in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos from 1969 to 1973. He was the mastermind behind the carpet bombing of Cambodia, which deliberately targeted civilians, personally approving all 3,875 bombing raids in Cambodia. And to this day, Laos remains the most bombed country in world history. Kissinger aided the Pakistani dictator Yahya Khan against Bangladesh's liberation war of 1971, enabling the mass slaughter of an estimated 300,000 to 3 million people.
We act as if we are trying to force the Serbs back into a mythical Bosnia that has never existed in history. There's no Bosnian language, there's no Bosnian culture. Bosnia is an administrative entity which contains Croats, Muslims, and Serbs, artificially created as a subdivision of Yugoslavia and foolishly recognized as a state by the Western powers in 1991.
It was a grave mistake to let in so many people of totally different cultural and religious and concepts.
He just couldn't die.
Oh my God.
He eventually just had to crawl into a cocoon and disappear.
Oh, he's
like
horrible.
That's kind of what happened.
He's just horrible.
I passed an article on to Jen last night that talked about how Henry Kissinger had stood in the way, probably more than anyone else, of a one-state democratic solution between the Israelis and Palestinians in Palestine, not Israel, Palestine, as it's referred. This article was written in 1989. So it just goes to show you that he's been at it for a very long time. Now, I'm not saying that the issue in Israel-Palestine is now all of a sudden going to go away, but it is pretty clear that this man, who was DC royalty for literally half a century, he got his Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. Vietnam War ends shortly thereafter. And this man was the envy of both major political parties, in particular of George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton.
He's extremely popular. I remember a point when I was growing up, like, had he been born in this country, he would have definitely could have been elected president. Like, he is somebody, oh, for sure. But I mean, that's just, I remember as a kid, how popular he was. And it's just horrifying.
And here's a guy, you know, he was the first Jewish Secretary of State, but it always seems to be these very, like, as we often talk about, bad representations of a specific culture and where a lot of that anti-Semitism stems from. Well, if the likes of Henry Kissinger is who we're looking at as the representation of Jews in politics, that is the worst kind. And this is a man who never apologized, ever, completely content with what he did, and didn't think they did enough.
I feel like there's been this very long line of psychopathic secretaries of state that are just completely unapologetically, brazenly warmongers. There's no statesman-like. Like, what? Think about who have been our more recent Secretary of State. Like these.
Well,
these
the current
people,
Secretary of State, in my opinion, is the president. He's calling the shots.
Well, certainly with everything that's foreign affairs.
No, absolutely.
But I mean, I'm seriously. It's like people like Hillary Clinton, people like Madeleine Albright, people like Henry Kissinger. These are psychopathic, like real bloodthirsty individuals. And that to me is very telling that because the Secretary of State isn't the Secretary of Defense, isn't the head of the Joint Chiefs, isn't the person who is in charge of military. The Secretary of State isn't somebody that is supposed to necessarily be a militant position. And yet I feel like we have some of the most bloodthirsty people in that position.
Oh, we do. We have the most bloodthirsty people in those positions. And of course, you're right, Yog Groove. Interesting name. Robert McNamara probably was the last solid Secretary of State, and he was replaced with Henry Kissinger. So it just goes to show you that those people, like JFK's Secretary of State, or excuse me, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not entirely sure. See, when you go into other administrations, it starts to get fuzzy as to, but I'm just saying, like, there are certain people, I think of people like Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, and Henry Kissinger, which are three people that I can give pretty recent examples have basically bragged about the amount of people that they've killed and still stand by those decisions.
And Asmuth, you are absolutely right. There is, listen, I have always said that this is our greatest asset and it's our greatest detriment at the same time. However, because of the endless opportunities for acquiring knowledge that is now available as a result of the internet, as a result of technology, there is a growing consensus now that because things have gotten so bad for the average person, not just in this country, but around the world, they're now starting to ask questions and wonder, what is the source of this problem? I have always maintained that Bernie Sanders' presidential run in 2016 was, even though he didn't win, was a watershed moment in our nation's history. It was the first time we talked about George Soros. It was the first time we talked about the Koch brothers. It was the first time we talked about guys like Rahm Emanuel. You know, most people didn't know about this stuff, but he brought it to light at a time where, yes, it was almost 9 years ago now, but so much has evolved since the summer of 2015, where people were having their political awakening in this country. And so from our perspective, it's now becoming a situation where a lot of people are what you would consider to be seasoned veterans. You can now see these things coming before they happen. Is it surprising to anybody that Henry Kissinger, for all the things that he's done, would it surprise you that he was one of the biggest impediments towards any type of a peace agreement in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians? I don't think that should surprise anybody. And certainly enough, if you listen, that was one of the things he talked about to the very end, that he wasn't going to change no matter what. And again, you can't live forever. And eventually these changes just, you know, they're inevitable. They will inevitably come to pass. And that's where we are now. But when you talk about, you know, the worst representation within a given culture, and again, that's the hot button topic right now because anti-Semitism is on the rise. You know, it's obviously not the type of story that you generally want to have to cover because it's just one where you're going to the lowest common denominator. But I maintain that the commentary of Juliana Margulies and the things that she has said recently is, the same commentary could be coming out of the mouth of Deborah Messing. We know that it's very much a very specific type of Jewish woman that talks this way, that basically makes it very unsavory for a lot of Jewish people in this country and around the world. They are the worst type of representation of who the Jewish people are. And you speak to that in I think, in a great deal.
I talk about that all the time because it really disgusts me. But what bothers me the most about this isn't so much the Jewish factor that she is representing in any way that, you know, Jewish people, but the level of just disgusting white privilege that oozes from this woman in the manner in which she speaks. And by the way, the only reason I even knew this is because Keaton and Russell covered it on Due Dissidence. And so I was able to hear the clip.
I had heard about it, but I didn't listen to it until I listened to them cover it.
Yeah, because otherwise I don't follow celebrity stuff. But the way in which she speaks is the most absolutely entitled, condescending, just disgusting. And so, yeah, the fact that she is speaking as a Jewish person on this issue in that manner is disgusting.
It's not only that, but the racism. If you want to talk about what real racism is, this is real racism. This is a person who basically is telling the black community, listen when the white woman in the suburbs of the city is talking to you. Listen, because we know better than you. That's where the real racism comes into play. Like, how ungrateful you people of color can possibly be that you don't come to our side when we are telling you.
But it's the way in which she says it. It's just so unbelievably.
Well, let's see how much of this
entitled.
You guys can actually stomach, because it isn't easy to stomach.
Do I have white privilege? Absolutely, I have white privilege. But the idea is to recognize it and lend it instead of ooze it and be completely oblivious about it.
Or defensive about it.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like Juliana Margulies. There we go.
It's those kids who are spewing this anti-Semitic hate that have no idea if they stepped foot in an Islamic country. These people who want us to call them they, them, or whatever they want us to call them, which I have respectfully really made a point of doing. Like, be whoever you want to be. It's those people that will be the first people beheaded and their heads played with a soccer ball, like a soccer ball on the field. You know, there was a film being shown by this black lesbian club on Columbia campus, and they put signs up that said "No Jews allowed." And as someone who plays a lesbian journalist on the morning show, I'm more offended by it as a lesbian than I am as a Jew, to be honest with you, because I want to say to them, you fucking idiots. You don't exist. Like, you're even lower than the Jews. A, you're black, and B, you're gay.
I mean, I think it's funny.
And that's not even the same clip that they played. So I heard another part of it that I just thought was so condescending. I hadn't even heard this section of that interview.
I didn't hear that either. Thank you, Colin.
Yes,
that was a great
that was a whole new little clip. So apparently the whole clip just oozes with that. Oh my God. Yeah, the part I heard was bad, but this was bad.
There is some truth to that, y'all groove. I would agree with that. There is some truth to that.
There's both.
There's both.
And this is where people don't like the term intersectionality, but it's both.
Yeah.
So for example, if you're born male, you have male privilege just by being born male. There's no doubt about it. If you're born white and male, you have privilege for both of those things, right? Like, so that's just what it means. It's like, yeah, I definitely have white privilege. I have, you know, not white male privilege. I have so we have, and yes, there is zip code privilege. There is socioeconomic, but there's all different kinds of privilege. But by being white in and of itself, is one of those privileges.
Now, I am, if you haven't adjusted your screens, I am white.
Oh, and he almost glows, but I'm with him. I feel like I'm the tanner person.
And I'm male. Now, am I privileged? It depends on what you mean by that.
That's not what it means when you say white privilege. It doesn't mean that you are not poor or have not worked your ass off.
To the average person, we are on the same playing field. The overwhelming majority of people are on the same playing field. You know why somebody like Juliana Margulies is dangerous? because she's playing from a level she's playing from a rung on the ladder that's a hell of a lot higher than any of you are and probably ever will be. So she's in a position of decision-making power. And this is what ultimately ends up happening in many instances across many different businesses. There is a bigoted element that exists within certain corners of the Jewish culture. Now, is that what I would consider to be universal experience? No, it typically exists amongst the affluent. That is where it exists. But why is this a problem? Because Juliana Margulies is very interconnected with the power vacuum of the actual system itself. AIPAC, ADL, J Street, you name it. This is the type of person, much like Deborah Messing, as we pointed out, that is always at the high roller events. And again, they live in this very protected bubble in society where it doesn't really matter if you're Jewish or if you're Black or if you're Hispanic or you're German or Italian. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're rich, you're powerful, and you're influential. And Juliana Margulies, to one degree or another, does check off those boxes in those powerful circles. And even if they're in the minority, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that she can get things done in the worst way possible. And the other thing about these audio clips of Margulies that cannot be understated, she lets her bigotry out and she doesn't hide it. She's basically said, I've had enough of pretending. I'm going to say what I want to say.
About those people.
About those people and those people. And the fact that she even said as a lesbian, I'm like, you're not a lesbian. You're playing one.
Right. So she's like, I am Jewish, but I play a lesbian, but I'm more offended as a lesbian. Are you kidding me? Like that is, oh my God, oozing condescension.
Absolutely. And
oozing condescension.
And that's it. And that's where the whole thing is what people need to understand when we're talking about white privilege.
Yeah, AutoNation, race is a tool of the capitalists. Tell me what is white. They invented it. And absolutely, race is a social construct. I don't doubt that whatsoever. But at this point in time in history, it has been so ingrained in us that there are so many problems as a result of it. So yes, I do agree that it is a social construct, but now it's become a problem because we've made it a problem. And to not talk about it doesn't make it go away. And I don't care if Morgan Freeman said that. That's just not real. That's silly.
For our friends in the chat who are obviously on the political right, and there's nothing wrong with that. So let's make that clear. We can have a difference of opinion, and you can believe that there's this anti-white racism. And listen, there is anti-white racism, but there isn't an infrastructure in this country designed to screw white people.
And I don't agree. I don't think there is, that's not a thing. Well, there's no white racism. Well, that's what, look up the definition of race. That's not a thing. Are there people that are prejudiced against white people? Absolutely. Are there people that are biased against white people? Absolutely. 100%. I actually have friends that don't like white people. I don't blame them in a lot of cases based on their life experience. But but they're not racist. They can't be racist. There's no racism against white people.
Well, I'll disagree with that sentence.
But no, look up the definition. It's again, words have meanings.
My personal experience with people that are in certain communities, especially the Black community, when it comes to white people, isn't a hatred factor. It's a trust factor.
It's a mistrust factor.
That
is real. But what I'm saying is that words have meanings. I always say that. And you cannot, there is no such thing as racism against white people. That's not a thing. That's a made up thing. I don't know who made it up. I don't know where it was made up. I'm sure there's a long history of why it was made up, but that's not a real thing.
Okay. And again, you don't like my music. That's not true. And statistical data shows that isn't, again, there is a way that it is done in this country that wants to highlight very specifically that, let's say, Black men are being killed by cops, but statistically speaking, that it's not true. So the whole point is that we're supposed to hate each other.
Right.
And the second that the working class understands, much like why we are huge advocates for actual labor unions, is because that's when it gets thrown out the.
All I'm saying is you can say that there's a bunch of people that hate white people, but it's not racism by definition. Understand what words mean. Racism, there is no such thing as white racism.
Bill Bradley has it right. There is more than one definition in the dictionary for racism. Only one of them includes the necessity for institutional power, and that is the new definition. Ultimately, it is about institutional power. That is where it comes from somebody like Juliana Margulies. She sits high up on the hog. She has had a successful acting career of over 30 years. She is a multimillionaire many times over, lives an extremely comfortable and privileged life. And that extremely comfortable and privileged life, at least in terms of what the affluent Jewish class is feeling right now, because not everybody's on board with Israel being able to do whatever the hell they want to the Palestinian people, that she all of a sudden feels that she's in trouble, that she's persecuted, that they're offending me. And so what happens when somebody of affluence and deep-seated bigotry does when their opportunity is presented to them? They will fight back, and they'll fight back very aggressively, because their crutch, which is what hurts the Jewish community, is them saying that because I'm Jewish, you don't like me. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my privilege to F you over. Okay. And that's how Margulies is thinking.
No, and I think you guys are going off on the totally wrong tangent as to what's what, okay? What you guys are talking about are individual people's personal feelings about groups of people. I don't care about that. I really don't. That's irrelevant to me. What matters as far as racism goes are systems.
Yes.
Are infrastructures, are things that are in place either policy-wise or cultural-wise or economic-wise. Right. So what you guys are focusing on, yes, are there Black people that hate white people?
Yes.
Yes, there are. But that to sit there and talk about that,
and
like somehow
corporate media like MSNBC in particular goes out of their way to try to paint white people in the worst light possible.
Let me finish. What I'm saying is, like, yes, those people exist. That is a real thing. I understand what you're saying, but there is no systemic racism of white people that in any way, shape, or form that I am going to take seriously in a conversation. And that is what we're talking about. And we're not talking about how individual people feel about other people. Yes, people are prejudiced. Good, whatever. Who cares? Move on. I'm talking about systems that keep generally groups of people suppressed.
Here's your system. This is the system right here. Jennifer Sang, thank you very much for sharing that. That's a perfect example. That's the system. That's not one person. That one person could be a piece of shit, but that's a universal problem. And I've seen it.
It does.
But that's not the reason that people are out there saying that every person, is trying to do that. And Guy, again, the definition of racism that requires power is not the only definition, just the only relevant definition for public policy reasons.
Thank you.
That's it.
And everybody who wants to sit around and bitch about somebody hating on somebody else, I don't care.
Waste of time.
It really is. It really is. Okay. It's just.
But in conclusion, Juliana Margulies 1000% should be taken to task. And every one of them who talks like this, on the one hand, be taken to task. But on the other hand, I'm extremely grateful that she is talking this way, because Juliana Margulies represents a segment of society who all think like this. They hate working people, hate them. Just like Henry Kissinger specifically said that the soldiers who went off to fight in Vietnam are nothing but dumb animals that we're using as pawns for our foreign policy agenda. And that is exactly how they look at working people in this country. You are just worker bees. You are just cogs in the machine. Do what the fuck we tell you to do and don't ask questions. But you know why we're asking questions? Because there is a working class uprising happening in this country right now. So hopefully it sustains itself. And with that said, we do have a guest.
We do have a guest. So guys, Steve, our friend Steve, bailed on us, even though we were going. Bailed on us, Steve.
We still had a good crowd and they haven't complained, which is great.
And so he bailed on us. And so I reached out to someone who had reached out to me on Instagram. Peter had forwarded it to me, and I'm gonna read it to you guys. I think I have it pulled up. No, I didn't pull it up, but this is someone who works wanting to do like freelance reporting and putting stories together, and reached out to me on Instagram to see if he could interview me about the Democratic Party in the state of Florida and just, pick my brain on that, which is, kind of funny for people who know me. But anyway, and so we got to talking, and I thought this might be somebody that might be able to help resurrect the Gen Z report. So I have my ulterior motives. But so I thought maybe let's see if he wants to come on and chat tonight.
Jordan De Paola.
Jordan De Paola.
Welcome to Generational Change.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How's it going?
Good. I didn't know Mehdi Hasan was fired. I've been off the grid, so I'm a little shocked.
Yeah. No, that's, that was, what? It's funny. That was the last major story we're going to talk about tonight. And we could talk about it, obviously, to lead off. Mehdi Hasan has often been somebody who tries to act like a rogue agent. He's not really in the establishment, that he's in it and he's not in it. But his history has always been one of he'll ultimately knee-jerk to the establishment when push comes to shove. However, on the issue of Israel Palestine, he has not backed off. He was suspended, as you know, along with Ali Velshi and one other gentleman who I am not recalling his name at the moment. I do know who he is. He's on Peacock. It's
AYMAN, something like that.
Ayman. So they were temporarily suspended and then they were brought back. And obviously they were given their stern talking to that you have to stop talking about Israel Palestine. Well, of course, that didn't last. And for Mehdi, it basically became a question of, can I live with myself knowing that there's a genocide taking place and I'm just going to sweep it under the rug, like the likes of Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, and Joe Scarborough are willing to do on the same network that they're broadcasting on. And so for him, he was not willing to do it. And today he lost his job. Was it Mr. Greenblatt that made a phone call and said, you have to get this guy off TV? Could it be our Congresswoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who made a phone call and said, you need to get this person off television. He's an anti-Semite. First it's a racist, then you're an anti-Semite. It all, you run the gamut across the board. Fact of the matter is, he is somebody who, thought that either he had enough cachet with the establishment that he could get away with it. And he found out today that he doesn't. And if you mess with corporate special interests, no matter how powerful you think you are, they'll kick you out.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because I didn't agree with him or like everything he did, but he was much better than the ones you just listed after that. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me.
Oh, no, please. Welcome. I'm glad you came on. It's nice to meet you in person. And I appreciate you jumping on and doing this. And I reached out to you and I said, what would you be able to chat about? What are you working on right now? And so talk about that. What kind of stuff have you been working on with your research?
So I was just thinking about this the other day. There's a lot of Senate races and there's going to be a lot of people surprisingly not running for re-election. So for Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, for Maryland, John Carper, and then Maryland, Ben Cardin. They're all corporate moderates. They've been there a while. I think the Delaware senator was there when Joe Biden was a senator. So he's almost 80, I think.
Is that true? Wow.
Yeah.
He's been there a while. And Ben Cardin's also in his 80s. Debbie Stabenow is nearly 80. And I was looking at who are the people that are going to most likely succeed them, who are the front runners. And it's not really looking good for the progressive left. So it's not surprising. But I kind of wanted to talk about some of them and just see what we could have a conversation about that. I think we actually talked about the front runner for the Democratic nomination and most likely the front runner for the Senate seat in Michigan. Elisa Slotkin, she is a congresswoman. I call her, I don't consider Hillary Clinton the most charismatic person, but I think Elisa Slotkin is basically a less charismatic Hillary Clinton, which is saying a lot.
Elisa Slotkin is the female Al Gore. That's who she is.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
That's the best way I could describe it.
That's quite unfortunate.
And what I hope you'll also talk about is, right now you've got Hill Harper, who is running for the seat. And Hill Harper came out the other day and made it very clear that he is running for the U.S. Senate. AIPAC tried to recruit him at a $20 million clip to run against Rashida Tlaib.
I saw that. That's and you know what? And kudos to him for saying no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I wanted to talk about her a little bit. So Lisa Slotkin was elected in 2018. She's a former CIA analyst or officer, and she also worked for the Obama administration. I was telling Jen about this on the phone, and she goes, okay, you said Obama administration, she worked for them. Okay, I got her now. I get it. Or something like that.
That was more. Yeah, I get it now.
Jordan, have you noticed that the Democratic Party has literally gone to task with recruiting so many current and former CIA agents to run for office in their party?
Yeah, it's very much so. Like Abigail Spanberger, who is running for governor of Virginia. Oh, gosh.
She's running so she's leaving Congress to go run for governor of Virginia. There's a person who's going to be president one day. That's why they do that.
I saw.
Oh, God. She, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I worked for an organization during the political season last year, and they usually endorse and back anybody with a Democrat, but they refused to work with her. They just said I was like, wow. I mean, if they're not working with her, that's saying something.
They're a vote blue pretty much no matter who.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, they were doing it for like Cindy Anks in Iowa, who has a lot of financial stock in companies she has oversight for when she was on the Financial Services Committee. But they were like, oh, no, she's a Democrat. We're going to back her. But Abigail Spanberger, they were against, which I found really shocking. But yeah, and one thing that I don't understand about the Democratic Party in Michigan, Elisa Slotkin did not win her seat by a landslide. That's a swing seat. I think it tilts R2. She won it this time by about 4 points. She won it by about 1 or 2 points, the 2018 and 2020. And this past election cycle, it was about 36 million spent total between her and her Republican opponent. And it took endorsements for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger just to kind of help get her over to retain that seat. So now, to me, from a strategy point, you're giving up a seat, basically. That's going to be an open seat, and it's going to be perfect for Republicans to capitalize on. So I don't get why everyone's backing her. I actually reached out to Congressman Andy Levin, who was a more pro-labor, pro-union, much better. He also lost the primary in 2022 to incumbent Haley Stevens. AIPAC spent a lot of money on that race as well. He's a Jewish Democrat, but because he, I think, supported a two-state solution and slightly criticized Israel. But I asked him, and he said he's not going to run for any races in 2024 because I felt like, okay, maybe he can run and maybe he'll have a chance of beating Slotkin. He said, I know I'm a different type of Democrat than the ones they want. And
that's the direction that the party's gone in. But, up until recently, because unfortunately Katie Porter has also been co-opted by AIPAC, when she was winning her seat 3 times in Orange County, California. Orange County, for those who don't know, is one of the most affluent red counties in the United States. Yet, for some reason, she didn't just win in a +3 R district. She was unapologetically progressive as a representative and went after, she did real economic populism on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we have to move to the right if we're going to win these swing districts, it's not true. You just have to represent the people. And Slotkin has been very protected by the corporate establishment. They are trying to shoehorn her into the U.S. Senate. Although, let me tell you something. The GOP, it will not shock me if the GOP sweeps Michigan in 24 because of Rashida Tlaib basically saying, I will martyr myself politically if it means whatever it's going to take to get something done in Gaza to change the situation. She's already telling her people not to vote for Biden next year. So if that's the case, then I could easily see the GOP, not only Trump, if he's the nominee, winning the state, but also having a sweep in the down ballot races. How do you see it unfolding?
That's a really good question. I think you're right. I think especially because even if Rashida Tlaib didn't do that, I think Biden has basically given a middle finger to many Muslim and Arab Americans. Michigan has a large population. Dearborn, Michigan has.
Oh, yeah. Biggest in the
yeah,
country.
So I think they don't. I mean, it doesn't even need to take Rashida Tlaib. I think they're very much against him. I think also, let's not forget Biden and Elisa Slotkin as well voted to send the rail workers back to avoid a strike. There's it's a big union state in Michigan. There's a big Ford auto plant in Dearborn, another big thing. And Biden really didn't do anything. He marched for a photo op with some of the striking Ford workers. But I think even
12 minutes. He was there for 12 minutes.
So, yeah, to me, I think people are kind of, this is looking past the virtue signaling. I call it performative action. It's, you know, instead of passing voting rights, instead of passing things that are going to help Black and brown people, he's going to give a speech and he'll go on a march with Al Sharpton, and that's about it. And he'll talk about how he has a Black vice president and how he appointed Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, although I do approve of that.
That's the one thing that we say that all the time. That's like the one person that he's brought in anywhere that we like.
But the thing that a lot of people need to understand, particularly about the prospect of Trump getting back into the White House, the conservative coalition holds all the cards right now. And I mean all the cards, because you're looking at one of two scenarios. The next two conservative justices, and they are conservative, that are on the chopping block are Alito and Thomas. So one of two things are going to happen. The Democrat could win, and then they'll just wait it out until the next GOP president is in the White House. If Trump is elected, both of them, not one, but both, will retire, and a much younger conservative justice will be appointed for both seats. So the second that the Democratic establishment tries to wag their finger and say the Supreme Court next year, just understand that ship sailed. It's all over.
Yeah. Also, let me know if I'm like going with the flow of everything.
We're just going to go with the flow. You know, you've been working on whatever you're working on.
Yeah. So thank you. In Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, the current Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester is going to run to succeed Tom Caper, I don't know his last name, who's been there. He was there when Biden was in the Senate. That's how long he's been there. She is running to succeed him. So one thing, is anybody in the chat or anybody watching from Delaware, say hi, because I'm curious if you guys know anything about her or what you think of her. She's going to be the next senator. It's a done deal, pretty much. Biden backed her. So a couple things I wanted to tell you that I found out about her. Okay, so she's a member of the New Dem Coalition and the Progressive Caucus. And as soon as I see that, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're full of crap and a politician.
What's the point of the Progressive Caucus?
The Progressive Caucus has not been worthwhile. The truth is that when you look at the size of the Progressive Caucus, you know that that's disingenuous. You don't have to, because the real Progressive Caucus is like at most 14 people at this point. At most, and that's being generous on my part. So I agree, that's absurd.
Yes, and then she voted to send those rail workers back, and to me that was a big thing to me, because I just felt like that was such a middle finger to American workers. She voted for the Trump economic growth, regulatory relief, consumer protection, the thing that rolled back Dodd-Frank even further when Trump was president. She voted for one of the few to do it, and that's also been attributed to some of the bank collapses in Silicon Valley. And she did co-sponsor the Raise the Wage Act. However, if you remember during the American Rescue Plan, Bernie wanted to get an amendment for $15 minimum wage, and about, I don't remember, 11 senators voted against it, Democratic senators. Well, 2 of them were the Delaware senators. Coincidence? Yeah, sure. So it'll be interesting when she gets in the Senate. Will she still back a $15 minimum wage, or because she's now in the Senate and is going to fall in line, she won't? She does not co-sponsor Medicare for All, and she's on the Energy and Commerce Committee whilst taking lots of donations from insurance companies, health insurance companies, security and investment banking firms, all that stuff. She was also on the Financial Services Committee. So all that stuff, that's a conflict of interest.
You realize, though, Delaware in general is like, you're not going to get any representation from Delaware that isn't corporate, because Delaware is a corporation.
It is.
I think they have, is it Delaware Delaware has something where like a corporate, I think the Young Turks did a piece on like a corporation can vote now or something. Was it in Delaware?
I don't know about that per se, but Delaware is where all the corporations go to stash their stuff.
Basically,
you get away with anything. Everybody will incorporate in Delaware for a reason.
Delaware is basically an offshore.
It's an offshore banking system in this country.
That's like an old.
Yeah,
it's an old thing. It's where the Trump Foundation. It's where the Clinton Foundation was where Trump had his organization.
You need no more, right? Like, what more would you need more than that's where the Clinton Foundation was?
Yeah, and I tried to. I asked. So in 2018, Tom Carper, the kind of the establishment old guard, who's a corporatist, in 2018 he had a primary challenger. This was during when the squad was coming. It was sort of the kind of that Our Revolution Bernie wave, and her name was Carrie Evelyn Ross, I believe, former veteran, and she ran against him. She did actually fairly well, about 30% of the vote compared to a longtime incumbent. And I asked her, I said, well, are you going to run for this seat? This is a perfect opportunity. And she had just been voted into the Delaware State House, and she felt like that would be too much and she needs to serve her time where she's been elected. But I just feel like these are so many opportunities for like progressives to really challenge. And right now it just seems like they're all just sort of gone, or they've been exposed as corporatists.
Well, you have two different issues here. Number one, it takes a lot of money to run for political office to begin with. The U.S. Senate is a completely different animal. And
although a state like Delaware, actually a state that small, a statewide race, I can't imagine is like.
Well, that's where the focus really should be. It should be on states like Delaware, Rhode Island,
that are
Maine,
more affordable statewide
New Hampshire,
races.
Vermont.
Yeah.
That's where you can really make an impact. But the other problem is that there is a growing sentiment on the political left, the populist left, that electoral politics is pointless at this point. The system is so broken beyond repair that you basically just need to, you need to let it bottom out, because we're kind of heading in that direction in a lot of ways. People don't trust the government anymore. And that's a very big part of when an economic and political collapse occurs, where you basically have a vote of no confidence, which is where universally most people are. You have the vote blue no matter who yahoos that, still think that the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party, and that somehow that's what's going to save you. And then you have, obviously, the conservative coalition of evangelicals in this country who think that the rapture is coming sometime soon and that you have to vote for the GOP. But once you get past those particular voting blocks, even though they make up a sizable amount of voters, there is still an overwhelming majority of people today who are ready for a new path. They just are. Yeah. It's a damn shame that Bernie didn't win in 2016, but it is the world that we live in today. And I'm not saying Bernie would have cured all the ills, but if Bernie did win in 2016, this country would look a lot different right now, in a very positive way.
For sure.
I think so too. I think so. I know so. I think we all know that. But you're right. And actually, sidebar, I don't know if you guys have had them on or have spoken to them, but there are some type of reforms that are happening. In Philadelphia, there are 2 people who are elected as working families under the Working Families Party, as opposed to Democrat, to the city council, Kendra Brooks and Nico O'Rourke. Kendra Brooks was retained, and I think they seem more bent on being the kind of working class champion. Very much not, they were not going to be Democrats, no matter how hard people tried, and people really tried to get them not elected. So I do think that would be cool to have them on, just to hear kind of their side of things and why
we love to cover nonpartisan. I mean, because the truth is that should be these should be nonpartisan seats. And a lot of places they are at that level, nonpartisan seats. And so, especially that's the best place that's why locally it's so much better to be involved with when you're talking about trying to get third parties and build up some sort of infrastructure. Everybody just talks about third parties with regard to national politics, but the best way to infiltrate is to get people that are third party affiliates in nonpartisan seats and build up their name, build up their reputation. And then maybe you go from there and you go into the state house and now you have your name, you have your goodwill. That's how third parties can build up. It's not going to it needs to happen like that. And especially here, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, you can't have a fly-by-night situation where a person is just running for president every 4 years. You actually you can build that infrastructure on the ground level.
And that's why it's important for people at those local levels to run with Working Families Party. Now, there are people that'll be in New York, I know you could be Working Families Party and Democrat simultaneously.
Yeah, you got
Yes.
multiple.
And I believe in Pennsylvania you can, but they made a choice to not be Democrats.
Smart.
Which I thought was telling, and I was really impressed by that. And you're right about nonpartisan races. I believe in a city in Kansas, a woman is now the mayor-elect, and she is a libertarian, but it was a nonpartisan race.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I thought that was, I mean, I'm not a libertarian, maybe on foreign policy, but I still think it is good to see other parties, not Republican or Democrat, being elected, whether good or bad. I just think that's at least a sign of some type of change.
Well,
some type of breaking up with them.
Yeah, I have no problem with libertarians at the local level if you have to balance a budget. The problem, of course, is that at the federal level,
Right.
there is this idea of austerity, which is just
It's
ludicrous.
not.
It's
Yeah,
not-
I was going to
it's
say
not-
a libertarian. Well, that's why at local level the party really isn't as relevant.
Our mayor is definitely a Democrat, but in terms of the race, it was nonpartisan.
Right.
And when you remove that label, it's amazing how many people were all on board, whether it was a MAGA Republican or a vote blue, no matter who Democrat.
They don't really know in a local race,
Yeah.
which I like.
But
And the
then
truth is they all want their streets to be fixed, right? Like they all want with it, because that's the beautiful thing about local. Everybody realizes that your issues are pretty much all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I worked on a board of supervisor race where I live in California, and it was nonpartisan, but they had to bring up certain issues because the person I worked for, she was more of a corporate Democrat, very nice woman, but more of a corporate Democrat. Her opponent, though, was at the Capitol, inside the Capitol on January 6th, and wanted to audit the election for a board of supervisors position. So we kind of had to bring that stuff up and point out she was more of a MAGA Republican.
But I also think but I also think that that's just a reflection of the system is broken and that people just don't trust it anymore. And frankly, I don't blame them. And not because I think Donald Trump was cheated in 2020, because Bernie Sanders was cheated in 2016.
That
and
is what
nothing
happened.
ever happened to anyone.
Right, there were no
who
consequences.
did anything to perpetrate it, specifically our congresswoman.
He has to go there.
Have to, because that is a crime that has not been brought to justice, and it still hasn't.
But it really was up to Bernie to pursue that.
It was, and Bernie should have pursued it.
I think so too. I mean, you know what? At the end of the day, yes, that needed to happen, at least at the level to break up the system that was doing it. But yeah, he dropped the ball on that.
100%.
Yes, very much. So yeah, and that's just kind of pisses me off. Thinking how different things would be.
Yeah. Well, that's why when the opportunity presents itself again in the future, we have to be ready, because I think there is a generation of people who, again, had to take their lumps, but now see the game, how it's played, and for what it really is. And then ultimately, that change will occur over time. I do think that. I do think
that. Also, I wanted to talk about Maryland's race. Maryland has Ben Cardin is retiring, and so the top two candidates, it's a strong blue state. However, they have voted for moderate Republicans. Their governor was Governor Larry Hogan, who was a moderate, who didn't vote. He wrote in Ronald Reagan in 2020. So, I mean, okay, instead of Trump.
I thought the dead don't vote, but no.
It was so Maryland's not opposed to voting Republican, but it's usually very blue. Obviously, we saw Wes Moore, the new governor, who's going to be pushed by the Democratic Party as sort of the next Obama. It's kind of obvious. And he's not running, obviously. He's the governor, but the two people leading the race to replace Ben Cardin is Congressman David Trone, who is a multimillionaire who owns a luxury wine label, doesn't support Medicare for all, voted for the rail workers strike.
Oh, fits right in with the Democratic
Beautiful.
Yeah. He's an old rich white guy. He actually ran for Jamie Raskin's seat in 2016. Jamie Raskin beat him. He spends a lot of money. He outspent his past opponent in 2022, 14-1, his Republican opponent. And his district is only D2, so it's another case of there is a possibility a Republican can pick that up, because his successor in that congressional seat, the Democrat, is not going to have that fundraising advantage. But David Trone is very much a corporatist, but his other opponent is a woman named Angela Also Brooks. She is, I think, a Prince George County executive or something in Maryland. She has the backing of the Democratic establishment. Wes Moore, the governor, endorsed her. Steny Hoyer endorsed her.
Oh, no.
She's kind of parroting herself as a progressive. She ran for that county executive seat, I believe, in 2018 against Donna Edwards. If you guys remember her, she was one of the OG. She was a popular. She reminded me a little bit of Nina Turner. A little bit. She was in Congress. She got elected around the time of Obama. She was outspoken, progressive, and populist. She, to me, would have been on the short list to be Bernie's VP if he had been the nominee in 2016. But there's some reasons why that didn't happen, like we just discussed.
Oh, yeah.
Angela Brooks also ran a smear campaign on Donna Edwards. She took tons of money and still is. I looked at her campaign website from real estate developers. County executive.
That's nice.
She also voted to expand the police budget, and et cetera, et cetera. So it just shows you that the Democratic Party is not changing. And the reason I wanted to bring those states up is because it's just we're getting the same crap. And I don't know. Maybe I wanted to vent.
I'm hoping that if you dug deep enough into this, you would somehow find some salvation. Were you thinking that if you just sort of investigated, you would find those people that are just in it for all the right reasons that really give a shit?
No, I didn't. But I actually thought in Maryland, Ben Jealous would have run, but it seems like he's not going to run. And he ran in 2018 for governor and lost, but he's more on the progressive end than either of these two. But no, I just wanted to talk about that and see what we can think. But yeah, Maryland is not.
No, and by the way, if Steny Hoyer is endorsing someone, there's nothing progressive about them.
No. And the party, unfortunately, is the Democratic Party is much more worse off than the Republican Party, because the Republican Party at least evolves in terms of its personnel. The Democratic Party likes to keep the dinosaurs around for as long as humanly possible.
It's true.
And basically, if they all have to go out in a box like Feinstein, then that's what's going to happen.
They do not want to pass the torch in the Democratic Party.
Just like Pelosi was supposed to retire 2 terms ago. She's going back again.
They just do not want to pass the torch. And the Republicans do seem to have a lot more young energy coming in their party. And we see that much so at a local level as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we're talking in a county that, like where we are, it's still a blue county. But when we see the events,
tremendous ground.
Yeah, and they're gaining so many young people. And that's something that I think is really interesting. I mean, did we talk about whether or not, are you technically Gen Z? Do you know, or are you millennial?
I'm 97, so I'm literally, I keep reading it. It's 97 above or 98 above your Gen Z. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
Right, but you're close enough to it. But you're close enough to it that you're going to have the same voting era experiences as the Gen Z people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the future is not, it's not bright in the electoral sense.
No.
But in terms of the labor movement, it is. And that's where the energy is going. And that's where you need people running for office that are leaders in their labor organization. See, that is where the change will happen. And that's what people at the local level and then ultimately at the state level need to understand, that if you're going to do it from within the confines of the Democratic Party infrastructure, you're already dead on arrival, because the party, just like the GOP, is bought and paid for by corporate special interest money. Look at AIPAC and look no further. And that's just one example. So there are many others that you can point to. But right now, it's painfully obvious that if you're going to run for office, you have to be doing it from a labor movement perspective. If you're not doing that, and I don't even care if you're doing it in the Republican Party, if you're not running on the issues that are of most importance right now,
it's the economy, stupid.
Then forget it. Then you're clearly doing it. Then everybody is an Elisa Slotkin out there. Everyone is one of her in waiting to basically just grab the brass ring and have
they're just moving up the hierarchy like it's a career, and that's what we're finding.
There's a handful of them here in this county that would take Wasserman Schultz's seat in a heartbeat if they could have that career. See, they don't actually want to fight for the seat. They don't have any. They
won't challenge her.
Yeah, there's no merit to what they're doing. They just want the career. They want that position. And I could think of probably 4 or 5 people off the top of my head that would love to have it.
Well, right. And in Florida, there's this definite thing where people who sit in seats sort of bequeath them. They basically determine who they want to replace them, and then they help get them in that seat. It's really gross.
That old guard form of power broken politics is if it isn't now, will be a thing of the past, because people don't want that anymore. The system is changing, and it's going to get ugly before it changes into the form that it needs to change into. That's why I think it's inevitable that Trump is going to get back in, despite what people want to hear, because right now the system is breaking at the seams. You can't sell Joe Biden again. Can't do it.
No.
And then if that's not enough,
he cannot win. I just don't see how he
right now as we speak, and quite frankly, I don't give a damn what they're talking about, but Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis are having their debate right now, and it's painfully obvious what they're trying to do. Gavin Newsom is the heir apparent to Joe Biden, whether at the convention or beforehand, if push comes to shove.
That's their backup plan.
But if they think that Gavin locked down California, Newsom is going to win the presidency in this country, they're out of their effing mind.
Okay, Travers, that's good. That's good.
So with that said,
I'm a California resident, and he's
a nightmare.
You know, he's terrible. Let me ask you something, Jordan. I know that we had talked, and when you interviewed me, you were working on talking about Florida Democratic Party politics and stuff. Is that the zone you want to be in terms of writing is partisan politics, electoral politics? What's your genre? Because this, the fact that you were willing to sort of just come on and do this, what do you call it in sports? It's like a pinch hitter. Yes. Pinch hitter. Is very appreciated. So if there was something where, and I'm sure that if given time and had a regular thing, you would be able to have a whole thing. You were really, I was very appreciative. So what kind of stuff do you want to cover?
Honestly, I'm still figuring that out, if I'm being honest. I feel like there's so many things that are interesting me about this election. Obviously, you talked about Gen Z reports. There's a lot of issues that are affecting us. I think, honestly, I'm finding interest in, like you said, I think Trump is going to get reelected and so many different things like that, and all the races going on. And I'm looking at what are the real issues that people are facing that are really going to get them out to vote, because it's not going to be, I was going to write a piece called "Is Abortion Worth the Vote?" because that's going to be the big thing besides save democracy that they're going to use to get people to vote. It's not going to be anything policy wise. It's going to be Trump's bad and abortion's on the line, and that's it. And then after that, what happens? What are these people going to do when you don't sign the Women's Health Protection Act into law? Because they're not going to do that. They're not going to. No. They don't.
There are so many things that Biden could do right now, to make it so much easier. But when you're completely and let's be honest, he's not cognitively there.
I don't think so.
And so when you have a president who is not calling the shots, I've been saying President Blinken for quite some time. When you have somebody else that basically is a shadow president in charge, making, doing anything and everything on behalf of corporate special interests, there's no point in trying to push them, because no matter how hard you push them, they're not going to change. They're past the point of no return. Now the question becomes, what can the ground movement do? And I think the best place to end this conversation, Jordan.
Well, but just let us, because he was sort of explaining where you're what you want to cover, but definitely politics, definitely electoral politics is what you're focusing on, because you could be correspondent for us. You can come on and
it's still important to cover him.
Well, I'd rather him do it than me do it. I'd much rather have someone else have to look into that crap. I don't want to know who all those people are.
I just want to make sure I fit in with your show and your viewers approve of me and all that. I don't want to.
Our viewers are hodgepodge, pain in the ass. Some of them, whatever. Don't worry about them. We've got a really solid group of mixed spectrum. We have a really our political spectrum in our chat is extremely diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have people that I've picked up from going on all different kinds of alternative media that are not progressive left-wing media spaces. So we have it, and I don't fit into an ism. So we kind of have an assortment of people, but really it doesn't matter what they think. It only matters what we think.
No, that's not true.
What do you mean?
You care what the audience thinks.
Well, I mean, they're going to be mean to some people and not mean, like, some of them are just trolls. That's just what they do.
Yeah. Jordan, final thought. Obviously, you have your Senate race. It's a big one.
In California, oh gosh.
You know, I do think I mean, look, they are trying to roll out the red carpet for Schiff.
And I'm anyone but him. Like, we're anyone but him.
I mean, despite obviously her terrible, terrible take on Israel, you know, Katie Porter obviously is favorable to Adam Schiff. But do you see is it going to be Barbara Lee or Katie Porter who squares off against Schiff in the primary?
Porter, unfortunately, well, California is a top 2 state, so the top 2 people, it's not. It's definitely, I think Porter is going to really try to court Republican voters. She's in Orange County, like you said. Yeah. She's going to try to get the suburban mom voters who maybe lean Republican. She's going to go for that. Schiff is just going to go with the media darling. I'm the quintessential politician. Barbara Lee, it just has really a disadvantage here. I'm probably going to vote for Barbara Lee because Katie Porter's really pissed me off as of late. And
that's
it's really
how I feel. That's how I feel.
I thought Katie Porter was a shoo-in up until when she decided that, I'm with AIPAC now.
That's
really?
a problem.
Okay.
That's a problem. But I wasn't thrilled that Barbara Lee was sort of like simping for the Clinton Foundation of a month back or whatever that was. I didn't love that either.
Yeah, of course.
No, but I think
combination of things.
I think what's frustrating about this race is Schiff to me is just a show pony who likes attention and has his head up as you know what.
Oh yes.
But Katie Porter to me, before kind of she revealed her hand, and I remember I found out she was running because Jen, you posted it. I wasn't looking and reading the news. You posted it. And I was like, oh wow, that's great. To me, the Senate is a stepping stone to the presidency. And if she would be sort of that no nonsense soccer mom as president and not take people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, we would probably get a lot done and she would take them to task. But she's been very disappointing, and she's shown that she's going to be sort of like Elizabeth Warren and just kind of fall in line and not be the fighter we want. She's also been very hawkish on certain things. She voted against the resolution in Somalia to withdraw troops from Somalia and Syria. Up until recently, she had voted for all the defense budgets. So she's been disappointed in that way. Barbara Lee is older. I mean, she's not going to be president.
78.
But you do realize most presidents come from governor's offices, not from Senate offices.
Yeah,
they've come from the Senate.
I know they
not
do.
Anywhere.
But the truth is,
governor's number one.
And the thing is, and it makes the most sense because I know people in our country are not properly educated. That's one of our problems here.
Right.
But there's a huge difference between the legislative branch and the executive branch. And in reality, we're better off with people that are chief executives being in an executive position versus somebody that's a legislator being in an executive position. And people don't think of it. They're like, oh, elected is elected. But the jobs are kind of different.
Yes, very much so. I think at the end of the day, people just want someone who's going to fight for them. Bernie was in the legislative branch, but he would have fought for them, and it would have been. So I think Elizabeth Warren, I don't think would have made a good president.
I agree. I agree. 100%.
She showed her hand when she called Bernie sexist, and that was the last straw for me.
Because for somebody new, because you can always, and this is what I said. Coming full circle about the whole political odyssey that people go through where they become, rookies to, sophomores to seasoned veterans, if you will. When you start talking like Elizabeth Warren talked when she was on her presidential kick and was taking tens of millions from a super PAC, you can see the transformation. It's not hard to see. They will give you signs where they'll start saying things, they'll start intimating that, we're not on board with this. The fact of the matter is, and anyone who knows anything about politics knows that there is a time where you have to play it. If Bernie, after Nevada, coalesced Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Marianne Williamson, and offered the VP slot to Elizabeth Warren, and she took it, Bernie would have won the nomination on Super Tuesday. That's how it would have went down. And anyone who knows anything about politics knows that that's what would have happened. Instead, Bernie either chose not to do that, or everyone who was in the I mean, listen, Andrew Yang said, if you support in any way, shape, or form UBI, I'm endorsing you. And I think that would have made a difference at that time. Andrew Yang had pretty solid political capital at that stage of his career.
Definitely.
Well, also in 2016, she didn't endorse him either. And
correct.
He came really close to beating, I mean, he was closer to beating Hillary than I think he did to Biden.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's debatable. But yes, Bernie, let's put it this way.
That was the momentum.
If Bernie won Iowa, which I still believe he did, and then won New Hampshire by a wider margin than he ultimately did, even in the situation that he was in, if he had taken Iowa and New Hampshire from Hillary Clinton, he would have won the nomination, because Hillary doesn't know how to fight from behind. All she knows how to do. Hillary from behind, you thought she was bad. You thought she was bad the way that it ultimately played out. She would have gone so deep into the mud, and Bernie wouldn't have. He would have just pushed her away. Like, I'm taking this over. I'm becoming the nominee, and you can go away, Hillary. And that's exactly how it would have went down. And so the system was broken from jump. And now that we know it's broken, and now that we know we can't trust the primary process, it's a question of how we evolve going forward.
Well, one question I want to ask real quick. If Bernie had been a woman, let's say he was a woman and had all the same values, would he have beaten Hillary? I do think so, by an easier margin, because they were really pushing the sexist, it's Hillary's turn.
That's all she had. I'm with her. I'm with her. And even just the whole premise of it, when all you can play is your identity card, it's because you have nothing else.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's really what all that says to me. And yeah, I do think that if Bernie was a female, and remember, Bernie wanted Elizabeth Warren to do it in 2016. Yes. Bernie, which is one of the reasons why when she went after him and accused him of being sexist, I wanted to strangle her. He wanted her to do it, and she wouldn't do it. She didn't have the balls to do it and stand up to Hillary. And so he did it out of like, well, someone's got to do it.
The truth is, Bernie is the only person in modern history who tried to do it clean. Everybody else is always looking for that. And listen, this is the problem when we've evolved to a point where we look to somebody like Elon Musk, who says, I don't need your advertising money. Well, that's easy to say when you are at one point or another the richest person on earth. Whereas somebody like Bernie Sanders, who's been a public servant for the better part of 40 years, decided, I'm going to run for president, and I'm going to, by, for better or worse, I'm going to do it on small dollar donations. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I at least can walk with my head high knowing that I did the right thing. Bernie had the presidency, in effect, in 2016 stolen from him. And so when people look back on what happened and wonder why there has been this cataclysmic shift.
It was because of Jill Stein.
It's because of Jill Stein.
It's all because of Jill Stein.
But all kidding aside, there's no question that it's almost like there's like a spirit that can't be put to rest. We can never move on in this country until there is true retribution for what happened in 2016. That starts with Wasserman Schultz and anybody else that had a hand in that, in what has shifted this country into such a downward spiral that we're cratering now.
Well, it definitely, the Democratic Party will never come back until they address that wrong. And that's really, and I can't say like all of politics won't come back, but the Democratic Party, until it really comes to terms with how they wrong Bernie and how their system is really ultimately undemocratic and all of those things, they're not going to come back because everybody really saw them for what it is. That when Democrats down here are out registering voters, the majority of people are not registering as Democrat. First, it's no party, then it's Republican, then it's Democrat.
Democrat way down below.
Way down below. And so this is Democrats out there registering voters. Like that's going to solve their problem.
And it's also creating a sense of defeatism amongst those people that are volunteers where they just don't want. Well, that's the thing. And that's the whole thing about our representative and others that are out there. You cannot move on until they're gone.
That should have been the squad. That should have been the squad's first thing. If they really wanted to be these rebel rousers and game changers, they should have said that when as soon as they got there, said, we need to address this. We're not going to be the party of the people if we don't address this. And they should have really.
There's a lot of.
With rare again, Rashida Tlaib has only been put in this position because she basically has no choice. But for everybody else, dude, it is a lucrative career times 1,000.
They don't want to give up their job. They don't want to risk losing their job.
It's the money. It's the TV time. It's the lifetime pension. The universal health care.
It's power.
It's everything. It's not one thing. Every day as a federally elected representative is a day to basically live like a king or a queen. Yeah. And the one person who I do give credit for acknowledging this fact is actually Ro Khanna, because he actually came on our show and specifically said, we're one of the 535 most powerful people on the planet. And they are. And they know it. And that is something that is very difficult to try to pry away from somebody, because as cliche as it sounds, with great power comes great responsibility. And for most of them, they don't have an ounce of it.
It's unfortunate.
It is. Jordan, we can't thank you enough for coming on.
Would you come back sometime when we could talk? You and I'll have a chat.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I was really nervous, but I was like, you know what? I'll do it. I'm going to give it my all.
No, and I was just kind of curious. And again, we're very casual here, but I was pleased, and you were just very you were a team player, and I appreciate that. And I know that if you are prepared and but I thought it was fine. It's fine to look at notes. There's nothing wrong with looking at notes. I wasn't sure if this was like, okay, is this the right topic to talk about? Well, they wanted to talk about it, but I figured I also we facilitated. But look, I reached out and said, hey, do you want to come on? What are you working on? Because we had a guest cancel, so it worked out, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. Thank you to the viewers for tolerating me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan. Have a good night. And just so everybody remembers, if you haven't been paying attention, and the reason why things haven't changed, this is why things haven't changed.
What are we seeing?
Unpledged delegates exist really to make sure that party leaders and elected officials don't have to be in a position where they are running against grassroots activists.
And there you have it. And there is why the Democratic Party is a problem. It really is. We don't want to have a problem where our leadership is running against people that are grassroots. We don't want to have that problem. And she says the quiet part out loud and just so matter of fact about it too.
It is kind of amazing how in the last 8 years, her face is like melted. Just saying.
She actually doesn't look bad in that. But that was also her at her absolute. It was when she was living high on the hog with the budget.
Very high on the hog.
She was living the DNC money and the wardrobe budget and the hairdresser budget, because she hasn't had her hair done. Budget. She has not had her hair set since she was running the DNC. So I guess it wasn't worth her spending her personal money to get her hair set, but she was fine spending party money to get her hair set.
There's a tasteless joke in there somewhere, but we'll leave it alone.
I'm not mocking her hair. I'm just saying that was the last time she had her hair.
What her priorities are in terms of what you're going to spend your money on, but that's a whole other story.
Well, hers is not her hair.
For those of you, thank you, Azimuth. Yes, Jordan was cool.
Thank you. And you know what, guys? And I appreciate all constructive criticism, but this is a kid who reached out to me who's just trying to get his foot in doing some freelance writing. And I just had a good conversation with him, and I thought, maybe this would be someone who would be good. And you know what? I thought he did great, considering he just pulled it together. He just got off of work, jumped on with some notes, didn't have anything really prepared, and was just whatever. And I think that's someone who, if given a regular slot and time to prepare, would be great.
Next Monday and next Thursday, we'll see. Obviously, Steve is going to come back on. For those of you guys,
we should make him come to Festivus.
Yes, we should make. Actually, yeah, I think that's probably going to be best.
We need to have, we could have Grumbine do kind of almost like sub-host feats of strength. I could see him getting ready to rumble, get ready to grumble.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we'll get Steve back on we're starting to collect our Festivus guests. That is for sure, which is very exciting. I don't like to give them away in case people cancel. I don't like to. I don't like to, just because we change it or whatever, but we're starting to put together some really fun.
I think we've got 7 confirmed guests now.
For Festivus, guys.
So
it's going to be fun. And I have some interesting ideas.
It's totally going to be incredible. It's going to be a great time. The best, the biggest.
And Festivus will, in fact, be on Festivus, which is Saturday 23rd.
The 23rd.
Which is Festivus.
3.5 weeks away. It's going to be here before you know it, guys. Remember, the holiday season tends to move quickly. Tomorrow is the first day of the holiday season officially. So you've got your 25 days of Christmas.
Who decides that?
Because you're 25. Well, excuse me.
Is that a Gentile
It was
thing?
it was last night because we lit the tree at Rockefeller Center. So that's technically when it begins.
That's when commercial Christmas begins.
Okay,
but when did like and this is the thing that I have learned over, many years, is that truly, like, people that are very into the actual religion part of Christmas don't necessarily celebrate in the same way as people who celebrate like our traditional Western corporate commercial Christmas. Like, there are people I know that they don't have a tree, they'll only have a manger. And like, I've met people that it's much more of a, I'm just saying, people celebrate their thing differently.
My father and his fiance don't do the 7 fishes because she will not eat seafood. Like, that's
so bizarre to me.
So, like,
I have to question people that don't eat seafood, but I understand. So my point is that truly sometimes very Christian minded people
Catholic.
do not, it depends. Well, that runs a spectrum. I'm just saying it's an individual thing. Certain people do not want to incorporate the pagan aspects of Christmas, which is like the tree and Santa Claus and stuff like that. I am just saying, I have met religious people that they do it differently.
Thanks, Bill. We really appreciate all of you guys coming on. And
absolutely. And I thought Jordan was great.
We're a small but mighty channel, but if you are so inclined to support our small but mighty channel.
We now take Zelle.
So we have Zelle and we have Cash App.
We do.
Guys, if you would like to become a patron, we certainly appreciate it. Danny Wyndham, thank you again for the $10. But as you know, the money doesn't go all the way directly to us. If you go to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month, that money will go directly to our show.
Extra shout out to Carla Spalding. Did you not run our people?
Carla's a sponsor?
I mean, not Carla Spalding, Carla Harrington. I'm losing my mind. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that to you, Carla.
What's Carla Harrington? What is she? What sponsor level?
She's at 25, but not just that, but reached out. She has been for a while, by the way, but reached out because she wants to support us and she doesn't do Cash App. And so she asked if she could send a check, which of course you can send checks.
Yes, you can.
We will accept checks, but we also do now accept Zelle.
You get the Lulu sticker as an intro gift.
And guys, as I've been saying on Patreon, which is how Carla reached out to me, it's the only place where people have direct access to me. That doesn't go through him. So like a typical Jew, you just got to pay up the. Sorry, I have to make a Jew joke. Terrible.
I can't help.
And can I also point out that Peter is Jewish?
Yes. On my mother's side, I'm Jewish.
That's the only side that matters to Jewish people.
But that's why I'm not Jewish.
I don't care. You can say that all you want. If somebody was coming to power in this country that was rounding up the Jews, you're getting stuck in the cart. That's my point.
I identify more.
You can identify however you want. Yes, and what I'm saying
but this is why people don't like Jews.
No,
see, this is that.
This isn't why.
So
this is what non-Jews would do. If there was a person in power, like a Hitler type of person who came to power and was rounding up people that were Jewish, what I'm saying to you is you're getting rounded up. It has nothing to do with how you identify.
Well, I also
that's my point.
I can identify.
However you want.
And I like how a religion is all of a sudden a cultural thing, because culturally,
I'm not saying I believe that.
Culturally, I'm Irish. Religiously, I'm agnostic. Completely. I won't identify with Judaism. I will not identify with Catholicism. I want nothing to do with it. I believe in the possibility of a God, but there is no actual proof that I've seen.
I know. I'm listening to him. I know.
Who are you pointing? Oh, Hitch.
People don't know. I have this poster of Chris Hitchens that hangs on the wall, and when I'm hearing people talk of religious babble, mumble jumble, I look right at Hitch.
Jason, I know what you're referencing. And just so you know, unlike my father, I will never wear a cross. So that's not going to happen.
For the love of all that is unholy.
Yeah, very unholy.
So so as somebody who is a Hitchens fan, I'm sitting here and I'm like, everything we're saying right now is feels like sacrilege to me.
Your mother tells me, my daughter tells me you're half Jewish. It's just the good half. If you guys haven't seen Goodfellas,
I'm totally Jewish.
Still one of the greatest movies.
I'm up to great like as far up as I can go. I'm Jewish. However, I did do a genetic test through not a 23. I didn't do 23andMe yet, but I did one where it comes back, show you your heritage, and I found out some very interesting things that were very surprising to me that I would have never thought. And I can't fathom how my mom is not aware that somebody in our family in our lifetime somehow cross-pollinated with somebody who is Tamil Indian and also Han Chinese, and how that is possible that
gene came out in your son.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, my son, Reese, definitely. And people who are Asian have actually asked me if he is Eurasian, if he's part Asian when they've seen him in restaurants. He definitely could get, like, you would easily believe that he's like half Korean, half American.
But it just goes to show you 200-300 years ago, the world was a completely different place.
Well, right. But the point is, I really thought like that I would get my DNA test back and it would literally say, you are 100% Eastern European / Russian, Ashkenazi Jewish descent, the most boring DNA we have ever seen on the planet. And in fact, there was Tamil Indian, which anybody who doesn't know that, it's like, to me, this is fascinating, not just Indian, but Tamil Indian and Han Chinese, which that I don't know as much about, but.
It was very interesting when my father did it because he's literally split German Irish down the middle, like completely.
You should do yours. Because I didn't realize that I would have Chinese.
Hey, maybe I'm related to, like a, royalty or some shit. You never know.
You never know.
You never know. I mean,
I have a friend that traces, she can actually trace her lineage back to Mary, Queen of Scots.
That's pretty cool.
Which is pretty cool.
Guys, Cash App, $Gen Change. What's our Zelle?
It's GenCore Inc. And it's GenCore Inc. And
is that right?
Yeah, well, you don't know. I hate when you spell core that way. It's like Marine Corps.
Oh, okay. GenCore.
Core, and then space, and then Inc. And that's our Zelle.
Period.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters on Zelle. You can just look up the name of the thing. We're GenCore Inc. on Zelle.
Okay.
And that I finally was able. I don't know if that helps anybody. I was just trying to accommodate somebody who wanted to donate and doesn't have Cash App.
Yes.
But and we will accept checks. So if anybody is so interested, please feel free to.
If so inclined, GenCore Inc. on Zelle. You can make a contribution.
And it's very helpful to us. We spent a couple of months being demonetized, and it really did.
And it's likely going to happen again.
Yeah, so. and it really did affect us.
The more we keep
it really did affect us because we're like one of those channels. Like, we don't make money doing this. We literally just get enough to sort of like make a few donations to some charities and pay a couple of people to do some videos for us, and we haven't been able to do any of that.
That's it. So yeah, we're gonna try our damn best in order to make things possible. But of course, you
ran sponsors, right? You need to do it regularly.
I thought I did.
If you did, great. So what do we have coming up?
So on Monday, we are going to have Cheryl Arden, who you
right. So if for anybody, check her out before you come on. So her handle on Instagram, which is where I follow her, is "Why is that racist?" As if it's one word. Why is that racist? And check out her handle on Instagram. She is somebody that I have come across that has taken it upon herself to help educate people in the white community as to what they need to know about their inherent biases, and yes, their inherent privileges and just certain things. And I've said this many times that it is not the responsibility of Black people to teach us how we need to relate to them and that's not their job. Right? It's not their job to teach us how to assimilate and deal with, but that's not their job. So Cheryl is her name, and she is someone that I think does a really, really good job communicating. She has quite a large following on Instagram. I don't know what her other handles are on other things, but I really like the way she addresses issues, and I just really wanted to talk to her, and I appreciated her. So we invited her to come on and chat. And I like the way she's been linking the settler colonial issues of what's going on in Israel. And she ties it into the work that she does here, which is really anti-racist and anti-bias training. And I really appreciate that. I follow a lot of similar type of people for my own education purposes. And I like her. So I really just wanted to meet her.
And on Thursday, we will be speaking with Colonel Larry Wilkerson, if you haven't
Also
met him.
very cool, guys.
Yes.
That's going to be very cool.
And he's a Reagan conservative, and he talks about what's going on right now, specifically in Israel Palestine, and he is just not having any of it. Listen, there's a lot of things you could say about Reagan's legacy, but if there is one thing that was there with Reagan, he was dead set against the mistreatment of the Palestinian people, and he was in favor of a one-state democratic solution in the Middle East.
We'll get all into that with the Colonel, but something I want to just point out that I don't know if you're aware of. So I went and did a little research into him, which is really interesting because I saw him recently on something, but there are videos of him throughout the years, right? And there's one in particular from 2 years ago, and the headline that I saw of this clip, I cannot remember who was interviewing him and who the clip was from, but the headline was, Israel will not be a state in 20 years. And this is somebody who has been sounding an alarm about the situation in Israel for years and has really seen the writing on the wall in terms of Israel being a liability to us in terms of international security. Israel is not keeping Jews safer. It's also serving to keep us as Americans less safe. Israel is a liability in terms of our position in the world. And this is just, and it's just bizarre. I'm telling you, I looked at, there's literally a video from, if you look up Larry Wilkerson, Colonel Larry Wilkerson, because there's several Larry Wilkersons. You got to look up Colonel Larry Wilkerson. And there is a video on YouTube of him predicting exactly what is happening 2 years ago. And there's probably some from even before that, but this one was just very particular about Israel. But it just that it will not exist as a state in 20 years.
Colin, can you grab the photo of the graffiti wall that says Irish Lives Matter and why everybody basically lost their mind as a result of it?
Why would Irish lives not matter?
Because everybody tries to pay. Why? Because the Irish, again,
where was this? Because if it's in Ireland and it's like
of course it was.
So then it's a Northern, Southern Ireland English situation.
So what people don't really understand, and this has been a big talking point ever since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, the Irish are 1,000% behind the Palestinian people.
Oh.
And so now...
when we say the Irish, you're talking about not Northern Ireland. You're talking about, because it's complicated there, but they relate to the Palestinians of being occupied.
They do. And so to that end, now that they're the Irish have always been kicked around. That is our history, and that's not changing.
Yeah.
We're still...
the Northern Irish are occupied.
No, they are occupied.
And they have had a lot of, there's been a lot. I remember when I was growing up, all of the stuff that was happening, even that Daniel Day-Lewis movie in the name of the Father, great movie. But that's that true story about the Irish, the resistance fighters that we were taught were terrorists. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But it's just, so they really relate in Ireland to Palestinian oppression.
Yes, they are. And if you never heard the Irish talk on the floor of Parliament in the UK, you'll understand that they have sympathy for the people that are over there in Palestine. And unfortunately, we are living in a world where the British, their opinion is much more important in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, because the Israelis are persecuted people, aren't they, Jen?
No, they are not.
Just remember who's on the side of those that are fighting for truth, justice, and
the American way.
Well, the American way too.
But that isn't really the American way. That's the sad part of it.
Well,
I'd like it to be. I'd like that to be the American way. Yeah. But when, we don't treat people the way we ought to be treating people, that to me is unfortunately what is seen more globally as the American way. And I'd rather it not be.
Yes. And I agree that there is, as Metalopoly is pointing out, yes, there is the Prime Minister of Ireland has said that Ireland is too white. Again, when you start that shit, all you're doing is creating rifts amongst working people, which is the intent.
Well, I would imagine that Ireland would be a pretty white place.
It is. It's like 95% white. But who
they live very far from the equator.
Yeah, who gives a shit?
Do people understand how pigmentation works? I don't understand if people don't know how pigmentation works. Like if you go to places in Scandinavia, also very white. The far from the equator is the whiter the people get. I mean, that's how it happened. We all came from, like, I don't understand why this is complicated.
It's like saying the Democratic Republic of Congo is too black. You know, it's
closer to the equator. See, pigmented, melanated, closer to the equator. It's really not complicated.
But of course, the reason you don't hear something like that is because it doesn't sell.
Do the Irish have white privilege? Yes. If they're white, yes. It is just a thing. It is one. Okay. I wish I had this
like
video.
A different word that I think would be
here's how it works. There was a video that this teacher once did this thing where he like did this competition where he had all his kids lined up on a field. And he's like, okay, take a step forward if you were born into a family with two parents. You take a step forward. Take a step forward if you are white. That's one step forward. Take a step forward if your father makes, a certain amount of money per year. Every one of those things is an extra rung of privilege. Okay. And the white thing, unfortunately, it's a big rung.
Based Chad Thunderjock. Now, look, I'm not saying that, again, this is a conservative commentary. But what you have to understand is that this statement is actually true in many respects, which is also why libertarianism is growing so significantly, not just in the United States, but around the world. It's why Milei won the presidency in Argentina. There are people who are systematically rejecting the current neoliberal system of the world.
I have been meeting an increasing amount of anarchists. I will say that on a personal level, I've been meeting an increasing amount of anarchists. And I don't think, for God's sake, Metal, I'm not going to get into arguing the levels and layers of privilege with you. You're being ridiculous. And no, I realize that the Irish people came over here and were treated like crap, as were the Poles and the Italians, and a whole bunch of everyone else.
What are you talking about over here?
Everybody at some point, like when my family people came over here and they were living at one point in what was tenements on the Lower East Side, which was not actually far from, if you were seeing the gangs in New York, from where the 5 Points were at that time, is not too far from where my people, when they came to this country, started. So in very unprivileged tenement, 8 people in one room kind of situation living. And so no, I don't, and yet they were white. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. And no, I do not think all Irish people are like privileged. Why do people get it? Why do I get into this with you? Cut it out. You're being annoying.
Last thing before we go, Mehdi Hasan has chosen, for whatever reason, to either fall on the sword for the Palestinian people, or perhaps he had another plan. Whatever the case is, he is somebody who I believe personally is very disingenuous. There is multiple reports of plagiarism.
Do we know what's his ethnicity? I mean, he's not Palestinian though, right?
No, Mehdi is, he's Middle Eastern, but I don't recall.
I thought he was like,
he might be Iranian.
I was going to say, I thought he was Iranian. I don't know. I don't know. But he's not Palestinian is my point. He was just speaking out on behalf of Palestinian people. Is that correct?
Right. And so he was like Ali Velshi and Hasan, I think is how you say his name.
Oh,
they were suspended temporarily by MSNBC.
Which, by the way, if I were any of them, I would have walked.
Oh, absolutely.
I would have walked.
Got to have an opportunity to move on to the next thing.
And if you're suspended, if somebody's going to suspend you over that, that is not a place. I'm sorry. I don't care, because especially at the level that you're talking about there, when it's not like you're living hand to mouth. I cannot fathom where you're being suspended for that and you want to hang around and wait to see if they're going to give you your job back.
And it's not like he went out with a big bang and all of a sudden was just like making this like big major statement on his channel and all of a sudden that was the case. But look, there's a reason why I have been anti-Rachel Maddow for many years now. Rachel Maddow in particular. I know that Joe Scarborough is who he is. He is scummy like that. That's not a new thing. But Rachel Maddow comes from Air America. This is a person who supposedly, like Chris Hayes,
she used to be good,
was very much a progressive leftist.
She used to follow Ed Schultz's show.
Ed Schultz, who is a personal political hero of mine.
I told you I called him and I spoke to him.
It's a good man.
I know. I called in the radio show when I used to listen to Air America. But yeah, she came on after him.
And so,
she was normal.
But to probably not many people's surprise, Rachel used her privilege of being an LGBTQ city dweller who has exceptional credentials, is very well spoken, and ultimately used that as a stepping stone to become a very wealthy person. And all she had to do was sell out the American people in the process. And now she's, of course, sold out people all over the world. She can live with herself. She can sleep at night, apparently. But you know who typically are able to do that? Narcissistic sociopaths. That's who's able to do it.
We know a lot of them.
Now, unfortunately,
that's what's so frustrating to me, is since we've been doing this, like maybe I knew a couple of real narcissistic people in my life prior to getting into this. The list now, it's like exponential. The amount of psychopathic narcissists that I have met in this line of work is just, it's off the charts.
And that's the real story here. It isn't so much
that's
that
the real story.
Well, it's not so much that Mehdi Hasan chose that, to make the career decision that I'm not willing to go along to get along when it comes to genocide. Okay, you finally hit, you hit pay dirt with him as far as what would ultimately be the decision what's the straw that would break the camel's back regarding his integrity and where he stood career-wise when it came to these major issues. There's a lot of others that are out there, but Mehdi Hasan has also been one of the few people.
Has he ever been anti-war?
Yeah, for the most part.
Because that's usually the only thing that really gets you canned from mainstream media, really, is if you speak out against the war machine. That's usually the one thing that is not.
Also been pretty vocal about being in support of Medicare for all. So there are.
That's not a deal breaker for corporate media.
Maybe not, because they're not in a position where they can lose on the healthcare front right now.
No.
But they are losing on the military-industrial complex front.
That's
because people are having enough of it. And that's a big part of the problem. Now, will he land on his feet? Maybe.
About taking up a collection for him.
But the bigger story is not Mehdi Hasan. It's the other people that are in the corporate media line of work, specifically at MSNBC, specifically the likes of Joe Scarborough and Rachel Maddow, who go right along with the war machine. And their talking points and whatever the hell is put in front of them. Why? Because they're paid millions of dollars a year to do it. Now, is everybody going to, give up their integrity for that money? No, but most will.
I don't think it's most. I think it's certain personalities, and that's who ends up in this line of work. I think that there's a lot of honorable people you would never know because they wouldn't be offered that kind of position. They wouldn't or work their way up to that point in the food chain.
Would you like to know who they are replacing Mehdi Hasan with? Michael Steele.
I don't know who that is. Yeah,
he was the former chair of the RNC. Because, it's like you can't hire enough Republicans to begin.
It doesn't matter.
I guess not.
It's capital. They all work at the behest of capital. It doesn't really matter.
They do.
Which party's talking points you're going with. Like, that's kind of irrelevant.
It is what it is.
Were his ratings terrible? See, I don't know anything about any of that. I think a lot of mainstream media ratings are crappy.
A lot of their ratings are bad. But in this case, you're going to pick on him and say that that's the reason that he was fired.
No, the three of them were clearly let go simultaneously in response to October 7th. That happened. Now, him coming back or his ratings or any of that stuff, I don't know anything about any of that. But those three people were let go from MSNBC.
At some point, you also have to remember, in that world, you basically get pushed out. So it's very possible that he was going to have to twist himself into a pretzel and basically be rendered useless to a point at which it doesn't matter.
That's probably not wrong, Travers.
So ultimately, he decided that he was going to go full on in support of Palestinian liberation. And they said, okay, well,
bye-bye.
Bye. And that's it. And the people that are out there huffing and puffing away are the same people who say, but Trump 24/7.
I don't see the connection between those two things.
Unfortunately for them, they think that Trump is the end-all be-all, and they can't understand how somebody like Mehdi Hasan gets fired, and they're not looking at the real problem here, which is the system itself, which is broken. And so,
the real scary stuff that's going on, the job repercussions that are going on for people famous people, non-famous people across the spectrum for taking a stand on genocide.
Yeah.
There are serious repercussions happening, whether it's censorship. It's not just happening in the media. I mean, it's happening all over the place. In academia, of course, it's happening. The fact that Columbia dismissed those two, the Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace, that's infuriating to me. The kind of stuff that's happening on college campuses, and I'm glad to see that a lot of these college students are standing up. But this shutdown of dialogue, this complete Zionist censorship takeover of all inroads and outroads of information is very, very scary. And I think that it's something that people should just be very cognizant of. And it was something that, when I forwarded you a thing, when you say how who's in charge of any society is who you're not allowed to criticize. And who are you not allowed to criticize? So, and they were having this round table, and okay, so in Russia, if you criticize Putin, you get in trouble. And in China, if you criticize or the Communist Party, even you could get in trouble. And in this country, you can criticize Joe Biden, you could criticize Donald Trump, you could criticize, but you cannot criticize Israel. So when you're looking in the hierarchy then of who's in charge, we really have to wonder about that in this country. Not to mention that you've got, it's something like 30-something states now have anti-BDS legislation. You have our Congress people basically signing a lifetime blood oath allegiance to the state of Israel and declaring that it is not an apartheid state. Like, we have to somehow put that in writing, even though the international community, numerous places and locations, disagrees with us. I mean, it's just so ridiculous at this point. And they're just really putting they obviously are scared, though. The Zionists are scared that they're losing control. And that's why you see such a clampdown. And that's what's really terrifying.
Well, that's why that's what censorship is always about. Censorship is about controlling the narrative, because otherwise your idea is a loser compared to somebody else's. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. But hopefully this is the start of moving in the right direction.
I am not aware of whatever pro-Palestine medal that you're talking about at the Christmas tree lighting, but I'm sure it's whatever random outlier that you're going to point out that was people that were disagreeable. Again, I was at the largest Palestinian protest this country has ever seen, and there was not a single problem. Not a problem. There wasn't vandalism. There wasn't violence. There wasn't fighting. There wasn't arrests. There wasn't anything. And so if you want to point out certain people that are outliers, fine. He's wanting me to rap, so apparently he's ready to move on. So I'll rap. That's when he's done talking and he wants to eat, then we're done.
You don't like my music? Metalopoly, Ray J, Teresa, Travers, Sable Minor, Bass Chad, Thunderjock, Alan Hehe.
Hey, Based, whatever your name is, if that's really you, send me an email.
Yeah, Jen's taking offers.
Send me an email if that's really you.
We have, who else do we have to thank for our wonderful commentary? Yog Groove, welcome to the channel. Great to see you.
And I know that wasn't Karina was on here before. Karina.
I don't think Karina, no.
Who was that you put up before? I could have sworn I saw her on here earlier.
I'm not 100. Jay Bogues, good to see you. Thanks for checking in. I know.
No, we appreciate you guys.
Bill Bradley, welcome to the channel, and glad to have you here as well. Randall Giovanetti, welcome to the channel. Usually, as
guys, this was we punted that guest because of Steve Grumbine bailing on us at last minute.
Steve, you owe us. You owe us for this one.
Telling him, making him come and do feats of strength over the Festivus pole.
Yes. I think that's about it.
Thank you guys. We appreciate it. Sometimes we got to kind of punt when we have a guest that cancels. It happens. It's happened before. I'm sure it'll happen again. That's what happens when you do live stream. It happens.
Face chat says no thanks. Night. Talk about a good-hearted troll. But, I got to have all that fun. Love you all. Appreciate you all. Smash that like button. Share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things we ask you to do. Become a patron if you can. Go to Cash App or Zelle if you can do that. Any and all support helps. Thank you again as always, and we'll see you Monday.